Welcome everyone, Questini here with another list for the best legendary lords for every single race. The final part of this list, and I'm probably going to make some compilation video of all of the lists that I've done so far. But we do of course have the vampire counts, and for the vampire counts is Helman Ghorst. Now I want to emphasize that I don't make these lists based on what I personally like or what I think is strong. I make it based on objective facts, faction effects, lord effects, starting position, campaign dynamics, and Helman Ghorst has everything going in his favor. Even if I find his campaign dull as dirt to play and the worst campaign of the vampire counts to play, he is still the best of the vampire counts. Why is that? Well, he gets 10% casualty replenishment, which is always nice. That's a fairly significant amount of casualty replenishment. He gets raised dead pull capacity for zombie units, poison attack for zombie units, as well as the lesser raised dead for corpse cart and mortis engine units. They removed the initial mortis engine that he started with and replaced it with the black coach. It was a bit too overpowered and Kugaf was having problems. They then fixed the issue Kugaf has in his campaign, I might add. Now, he's immune to plague attrition. Like, this guy is just like a giant middle finger to Kugaf. Poor Kugaf. Like, imagine having a faction based on plagues and having to deal with someone whose main army is immune to plagues. That's great. Immune to contact effects and 30 armor for zombie units and crypt ghoul units. Furthermore, he gets a bunch of benefits like raised dead cost minus 15%. He gets Thrall Master, which gives him the raised dead rise again plus 15% chance for destroying units to be restored after battle. Reinforcement recruitment cost minus 15%. Raised dead cost minus 15%. Once you get it, you do get it at level 13. And then also at level 13, you get Lord of the Scourge, which will give you a battle healing cap for your army, casualty replenishment, upkeep for zombie units, and upkeep for skeletal warriors and skeletal spearmen. His special skill line gives him campaign movement range, speed for his entire army and himself, melee attack for all zombie units faction-wide, as well as a lot of melee defense and melee attack, missile resistance, 10% ward save, a lot of armor, more battle healing cap 500% for zombie units, all armies faction-wide, the Ravenous Dead ability, so you don't even need spells or an Unholy Lodestone to heal the zombies. You can just use the Ravenous Dead, which you're going to get on all armies faction-wide, and 50% weapon strength for zombies. He is absurd. Also leadership when attacking, because why not? Why not make him even more powerful than he is? He also gets Heroic Rune rank plus 5 for Necromancers. Now, here's what makes Ghorst so ridiculously powerful, beyond the faction effects and lord effects. I mean, the lord effects and faction effects would make him the best of the vampire counts, but here's what makes him one of the best legendary lords flat out in the entire game, because it goes way further than that. Like, you can get almost an entire damned army from turn 1. They've also improved his start position, so now you can take one settlement very, very quickly. The starting province has also been improved, so you just deal with these minor ogres over here very, very quickly in your campaign in Shambletown, and then you move after you deal with like this particular settlement, and then you deal with Flayed Rock, and then you wipe out Kugaf. And you might want to go further west to deal with Emmerich, instead of dealing with Greases. The reason you don't want to deal with Greases is someone else is going to deal with Greases, and you can take advantage of their war. So, what you can do as Ghorst is you can wait for Grimgor to declare war on Greases. It may not happen in every situation, but you can certainly wait for it to happen. And when it does happen, you can just take complete advantage of it by waiting until it does occur. You will get obviously vision with Greases very quickly, then turning all of your armies against Greases, wiping him out, maybe selling some of his territory to Grimgor, and getting an alliance with Grimgor. Now, anyone who can ally Grimgor is already a really powerful legendary lord, because Grimgor is a kind of death and destruction. Greenskins generally don't make great allies because they tend to be hyper-aggressive. In the case of Grimgor, that doesn't matter because Grimgor will just wipe out everyone that he encounters. If he struggles, you can help him if you so desire, because you alone are a tide of death and destruction. And poor Kogaf, who can't stand up to you. Unfortunately, you can't really take. Unfortunately, the Dragon Isles aren't necessarily the best province for you, but it doesn't matter. The vampire counts have a good economy, have a good situational control. So even though it is unpleasant climate, you can certainly make it work. Now, Cathay might be an issue, specifically Xiaoming, but Cathay also doesn't really stand much of a chance against you. The only faction that may stand a chance against you is actually Drazef. That's because he might be well suited to just blowing you out with his armies. Because all that healing you're doing, well, as you might imagine, all that lovely healing you're doing doesn't really matter when you're getting nuked by Drazef or when he's using long-range fire attacks against you. But even so, even with the Chaos Dwarves, it's still not really all that relevant, and the other factions in a campaign can't really stand up to you. Crucially, Ghorst, one of the main benefits in Ghorst's campaign is the fact that he can get a lot of cheap, very cheap, effective armies. Because zombies are very cheap. So zombies only cost 100 by default and have 26 upkeep. You buff them to the point that they're better than many of the early game units that are significantly higher cost. So that means you can maintain a lot of these armies of zombies and just completely obliterate your foes. Now, I want to emphasize, I hate this campaign. I hate this campaign because the auto resolve is ass. I hate this campaign because the playstyle is just so boring to deal with. You just shamble towards your enemy, annihilating everything in your path with bad armies, with armies that should be wiped out, but you do it anyway. You win, and no one can stand against you, but it is so very dull. However, he is the best. If you want a more fun campaign, Vlad, Isabella, and yes, Manfred are much better. Kemmler himself is also much better to use. As a necromancer type character, I think Kemmler has a far more interesting campaign. Ghorst is strong, Ghorst is boring. For the Warriors of Chaos, it is Be'lakor. While Archaon certainly is much better in the late game if you're willing to endure 60 turns of being bored out of your mind, completely crushing weak factions, but in terms of the early game potential, Be'lakor wins hands down. The reason Be'lakor wins hands down is because he has all of the gods, all of the gifts of chaos from the various gods unlocked from turn 1. So that means he can get he can start building souls with all of the chaos gods from the very beginning. So he can get much easier access to all of the units, all of the faction effects. Not all of them are worth it. Siege, for instance, is particularly worthless, I would argue, in a lot of ways, like losing 10 control for 35% research rate as Warriors of Chaos who can get students is not worth it as a benefit, for instance. Though there's certainly some decent siege units available as well. And maybe, you know what, maybe getting the cooldown for all spells with a miscast chance isn't too bad, but generally not worth it. However, getting the Nurgle benefit, getting the Khorne benefit from post-battle loot, all of those things are absolutely worth it. Or even the Slaaneshi benefit, which buffs your income by 35% at the cost of 10 control, which is certainly something you can deal with. And if you get a rebellion, who cares, right? Rebellions are free experience and money, more or less. Especially for a faction like the Warriors of Chaos. In fact, I'm not quite sure a full rebellion stack would be able to overcome the defenses of a Dark Fortress. A tier 1 one, sure. A tier 2 one, not so much, I would argue. Especially if you get a couple of if you recruit an emergency lord with a couple of units just to handle the situation. But having all of the gifts of chaos from the start is great. Being undivided is great because it gives you that hell cannon from the very start. I think like the hell cannon should be standard for all the warriors, all the champions and Warriors of Chaos legendary lords, because The undivided ones are certainly far more powerful than the dedicated ones in a lot of ways, including in this respect. On top of that, he gets 2 vassals from very early on. So he has the Sightless. Now, originally, you couldn't just win by vassalizing them. You had to destroy them. But now you can vassalize all of these. Hell, you need to destroy or vassalize Sigvald. And, well, he's the most powerful of the Legendary Lords of the Warriors of Chaos in terms of AI control. See, the thing is, Sigvald will be the one that generally builds a massive AI empire, but you can easily deal with him, confederate him, no problem. Even if you might have to fight a couple of difficult battles, you certainly can win those battles. Furthermore, Be'lakor gets the ability of upgrading all the basic demonic units. Now, for things like Plague Bearers or Demonettes or the Pink Horrors, doesn't matter. But for Bloodletters, it does. Bloodletters, Exalted Bloodletters, are one of the best anti-infantry unit in the entire game. They're bad in auto-resolve because of their poor armor. They're not great from that perspective, but in an actual battle, they will tear through virtually every other infantry unit in the entire game. That's Be'lakor's power when we're looking at it. Faction effects, he also gets an upkeep benefit for demonic units, so he's actually much better to play than every other demonic faction in the game. I think originally Creative Assembly wanted him to make him like Daniel 2.0 in a sense, like an undivided demonic faction, but then they reworked the Warriors of Chaos and realized demons are absolute ass, so they made him a Warriors of Chaos Legendary Lord. But he's really focused on getting those demons. So having that major upkeep benefit, well, he can maintain Bloodletters for cheaper than Chaos Warriors, and he can get a lot of these guys as well. You want to see a guy who's much better than Skarbrand, but can have the same army as Skarbrand? Yeah, look at Be'lakor in a lot of ways. In fact, Be'lakor might actually be better in a melee fight than Skarbrand. That is pretty bloody ridiculous. You do get the Shadow Shroud ability for damage resistance. That lasts a decent amount. And your skill line gives you a bunch of other abilities like Lord of Torment, which effect intensity increases by each enemy unit in range with leadership wavering or lower, and replenishes HP of combatants. Warband upgrade cost by 75% for demonic units, leadership, experience for undivided lords and heroes, blood magic, so you're getting weapon strength for Khorne demon units. Yes, that's great. Then Whispers and Darkness, which reduces the leadership of enemy units, gives you weapon strength bonuses versus infantry, hero recruit rank for cast sorcerers, cooldown for Lore of Shadows, and Winds of Magic cost for Lore of Shadows spells. And he does have, obviously, the Lore of Shadows. Though, when it comes to that, I just want to mention this. When it comes to, like, leveling Legendary Lords, I tend to ignore their casting tree. The reason is, I want to obviously buff the army. Right, so if I'm playing Be'lakor, I want to get Cast Vanguard at the very least. Maybe I want to get Savage Bloodlust as well. Sure, I may want to get those two. Both of them are pretty good. But here's the thing about the magic skill line. You will have to sacrifice somewhere else. Like, you obviously want the special skill line, so that's going to be some skill points. You want the red line. You want some points of the blue line. Maybe not all of them. Maybe you don't want to go past, Unholy Resilience in this case, for instance. But if you can get Renowned and Fear, that is actually pretty good, because the campaign move range and the upkeep will add a lot, as well as the upkeep in general, like Sustained by Slaughter. So you have a lot of reasons to go down the red skill line, the blue skill line, the special skill line, and that means you're going to be left without a lot of skills. For a regular Lord, this wouldn't necessarily be a problem. But for a Legendary Lord who also has all the top skills, all the special skill lines, this does become an issue. So, and generally buffing the melee skill line and getting a hero caster is usually the better choice. There are some exceptions to this. For instance, Drafts of the Ashen is the biggest exception to this rule, but virtually everyone else, you want to focus on their special skill line and their melee skill line if they have it. That's the issue. Of course, you can get the Legendary Lord that doesn't have the melee skill line, like Katrin and Teclis. Teclis works out, of course, because he's a major caster. Katrin does not, because her magic skill line is ass. I mean, it would be better. It would be much better if she had the major cost reduction for frost magic, but she does not. By the way, Be'lakor has a lot of flexibility in his campaign beyond that because he can set up these shadow rifts. And he starts with 2 of them already built. He starts with one in the Ostermark over here. You can see it right here. And then he starts with one all the way in the Southern Cast Wastes. And in the Southern Cast Wastes, if you teleport Be'lakor over here to wipe out everyone, you can easily do so. Who's going to stand in your way? Kairos and Oxyotl? Well, Kairos might be a bit of a challenge if you're playing on Legendary difficulty because of the old AI bonuses, AI Kairos as opposed to playable Kairos. AI Kairos is an absolute menace. But you can take over the entirety of the Southern Castways, get a bunch of Dark Fortresses. Like we start with one here in the Demon's Gate, another one in Fate Weaver's Crevasse, and then we get another one over here in the Forever Maze. So we're looking at four Dark Fortresses over here that are in an incredibly safe location, and no one's going to bother you here. Even if they do try and defeat you, they're not going to be able to stop you. And there's plenty of actions, by the way, to vassalize over here, including Kairos himself. So you do have a lot of power as Be'lakor in your campaign to just wipe everyone out. I mean, it's kind of a shame AI Be'lakor doesn't use those portals. It would be interesting to play a campaign as Draika and to have Be'lakor show up through the portal. That would certainly make that campaign a lot more difficult than it is. And it's a very easy campaign, so that could improve things by quite a lot. Furthermore, his starting position is one of the most secure in the entire game because he does have 2 vassals to defend this territory. The problem with Albion is it's difficult to attack. See, generally, when we're talking about islands, you want ports that can be easily assaulted. Albion has a port here in the Isle of Wights, which is controlled by this Norscan faction. But this Norscan faction might be able to handle quite a lot of invaders. And even if invaders do manage to overcome these guys, they still have to deal with a demonic faction of Siege that's under the control of a Keeper of Change over here. So as you might imagine, that makes this place complete and utter misery to invade. Like, basically, you could completely ignore Albion and you can have Doomstack showing up here, and you may not even have to fight a single battle because your vassals can hold the line. And even if they fail, which is far more unlikely than you might think, even if they fail, any invader trying to take down your Dark Fortress is going to have to go through all this Cast Corruption to attack it and then deal with the Dark Fortress, which is a fairly difficult battle in the best circumstances from the garrison alone, let alone if you actually get an army, a crap one, but if you get an army to recruited over here to help out, there's like, you could have an endgame crisis showing up and you probably could win. Not that there's any nearby endgame crisis either. So you have a lot of flexibility, though generally speaking, I would say going for Norsca is the best possible option, like vassalizing Wulfric. Yes, you might not take his Dark Fortress, but that's fine. Just vassalizing Wulfric, vassalizing Legendary Lords in general is the better play, as opposed to bothering with all the minor factions. Like, you do want to vassalize these 2 minor factions, but after that, focus on the Legendary Lords. And here's the thing, only Archaon and Be'lakor can confederate the other Legendary Lords, or force to confederate the other Legendary Lords of the Warriors of Chaos. So if you're playing Be'lakor, you can get Sigvald, you can get Valkia, you can get Festus, you can get all the other Legendary Lords of the Warriors of Chaos. That is an absurd level of power. I emphasize, endgame Archaon is much stronger because of all his research, souls, and diplomatic benefits. But early game, Be'lakor wins hands down. He can expand quicker, he can traverse the campaign map faster, he has a lot more early game power. Archaon just gets stronger later on once he unlocks all the Gifts of Chaos, because he can constantly maintain them with a large number of vassals. But I would say Be'lakor's campaign gameplay is vastly superior to Archaon. Finally, for the Wood Elves, it is Orion. I could have added Archaon to this particular video, and I could have renamed the video the best and most boring Legendary Lords for every race, because that's how it is. Ghorst is really boring, Archaon is really boring, and Orion is also really boring, but all of them are incredibly powerful. Until they decide to fix Orion. Who knows, maybe they'll do it with 3.1 and this video will become redundant very, very quickly. But until that point, Orion is absurd. Though his campaign is utter trash as well. Like, Durfu is much better, the Sisters are much better, Draika is much better in terms of actual campaign gameplay. But power-wise, yes, Orion wins out. He won't have the same I win army from turn 1, but it doesn't matter, because once you start declaring war on factions and you get that 0% upkeep for all your armies, you're just gonna obliterate every single person in your path. So for instance, let's say I go over here to Ikekla and declare war on Estalia. I go to the Broken Nose. I might declare war on Belegar, or wait until Belegar shows up. I go over here to the Fey Enchantress, declare war on the Red Cloud. That is pretty absurd from the very beginning of your campaign. You're going to start seeing a significant upkeep reduction from the beginning of your campaign. And the problem with that is the Wood Elves are not designed around having 0% upkeep. The Wood Elves are designed around having armies that cost money. So when your armies suddenly stop costing you money, the entire race quickly breaks down very, very quickly. The reason is, like, once you get to like 0% upkeep in this campaign, you are just gonna start, what you're gonna start doing is you're gonna get to tier 3. Yes, it is gonna take turns, specifically 16 turns, right? Because you can't recruit Treekin until you're at tier 3 with the Tribal Stone. If you're Draco or Durfu, you can recruit them earlier, but if you're Orion, you have to get to tier 3. Okay, so you're going to spend 16 turns just recruiting Gladeguard. That's not a bad campaign playstyle, by the way, to be very, very clear. You can do a lot with Gladeguard, no problem. But once you start getting 0% upkeep Treekin in your campaign, you're just going to steamroll absolutely everyone. Because it doesn't matter how good a faction is, no one can stand up to a dozen stacks of Treekin in their campaign. And as you encounter more and more factions, and there's research to help you with this, by the way. There is research that gives you vision. I can't remember which one it is, but there is a particular research. This one. It's actually pretty early on. If you get the Wisdom of the Eagle Lords, it will provide line of sight over all the magical forests. So what do you do once you get vision over all of the forests in the game? Is you declare war on every minor faction in the game that isn't going to cause you diplomatic issues. Or you could just play this entire campaign by declaring war on the whole damn world from turn 1, get 0% upkeep, start recruiting armies, because no one's going to threaten you. That's the thing about Orion's campaign. No one is going to stop you in this campaign. No one's going to show up here with doom stacks to wipe out the Oak of Ages, because the garrison itself is at tier 1, and you can easily get to tier 2, just need a bit of money, because that's the thing, you're not limited by growth in a Wood Elf campaign. Once you get this to a higher tier, and obviously once you get the Kingsglade to a higher tier as well, very few armies could actually overcome the garrisons of your settlements. That's one of the main things about the Wood Elves. Yes, you get various events, but you can actually just auto-resolve a lot of those event armies that show up in a campaign. So that's one of the things that makes Orion so ridiculously powerful. The fact that like all other Wood Elf Legendary Lords, he can just show up, teleport to a particular settlement, and wipe them out in an area with relative ease is another significant strength that he has in his campaign. Honestly, Orion himself is worthless. You don't even necessarily care to use Orion himself. His offices are not that great. Like, I mean, there's some good stuff, but the problem is, there's obviously limitations on the people you can assign in offices. What you really want to do if you're playing Orion is you want to get an Ancient Treeman, and you want to push Treekin in this campaign. A Treekin, Treeman, and just swarm your enemy. Like, you can probably play this campaign after a certain point by declaring war on the whole world and just start resolving every battle, because you bring 2-3 stacks of Treekin to every battle will wipe everyone out. And that's the thing. You'll be rolling in so much cash, you won't even know what to do with it. I mean, consider this. This is turn 1, right? And I haven't declared war on that many factions to reduce the upkeep to 0%. Once I reduce the upkeep to 0%, I'd be making 3,000 money. And once I start getting the economy to a higher level, I'll be making tens of thousands of income. Like, once I get all of the other trees over here, I'll have a stronger economy than anyone else in the game, and I only have to pay for buildings and your recruitment. And that is a ridiculous level of strength that you can have in a campaign. Awful campaign, though. Like, that's the thing. He's a powerful legendary lord with a really boring and awful campaign. But it is a playable campaign. It's not the Katep situation. It is an actual playable campaign that you can actually achieve a lot in, instead of the awful design of Katep's campaign. But I would say that playing Durfu, Draika, or the Sisters of Twilight is a much better experience overall. And that is it. Kostin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.